No!
How about this? The U.S. Park Police are...
Let's start by storming Blackgate!
What's going on, everyone? So I know normally I don't do this review format, but I figured this time around I would, just because I'm a little bit behind in terms of 2021 releases. I still have to watch Army of the Dead. Obviously, I still got to watch The Conjuring 3, which I'm going to be watching Tuesday as of the filming of this review. And then obviously also Cruella. So a little bit backed up, so I figured I would just throw together the 3 2021 movies that I have seen and talk about it in one review. So those 3 movies are Profile, Those Who Wish Me Dead, and of course A Quiet Place Part 2. So those 3 movies I'll be talking about, obviously spoiler-free, and I'll obviously give you guys like a little bit of what I'm talking about. Not really premise-wise, because obviously you can just go on IMDb and look it up. But yeah, I'll be talking about them briefly. So yeah, here we go, guys. All that exposition aside, let's get started. So the first movie I want to talk about is Profile. If you've seen the trailer for the movie, honestly, you pretty much have seen the movie. The themes and messages are very surface-based. The acting is passable for sure, but characters do things that don't really feel fully fleshed out or earned. It's very frustrating, honestly, in those regards. And I'm normally someone that, when I watch, characters in movies and TV shows, normally I'm able to see, where they're coming from and everything. But in this movie, I wasn't really able to. It didn't feel 100% earned. And of course, they then had the slap in the face that it's based on a true story. And I'm kind of like, see, I say it's not 100% believable, but then it's based on a true story. How much of it's actually based on a true story, I don't know, but I did feel kind of like a jerk. But I will say, here's the thing. I will say the movie is diverting. It does have that going for it, but it is also very vapid, unfortunately. Like I saw it a couple weeks ago. I barely remember watching it. So Profile, I'll give it a 2 out of 5 star rating. So yeah, 2 out of 5 stars. It's quite disappointing. It doesn't get a hot sauce rating. Would I recommend it? Not really. I would say just watch the trailer. It missed an opportunity, especially the format that it went for. I thought that, it taking place in one setting, I thought that could have been utilized, even more, but alas, here we are. So next up, that was Profile, obviously. Oh, I also forgot to mention, I saw Profile in theaters. That's where I saw it. Next up, these other 2 movies I also saw in theaters. Next up, I saw Those Who Wish Me Dead, which is a Tyler Sheridan movie, the director who did Wind River, and he also wrote Hell or High Water and, of course, Sicario. I love Taylor Sheridan. I think he's a very talented individual, and he hasn't disappointed me until this movie. To be honest, Taylor Sheridan, Angelina Jolie, what could go wrong? Well, the problem is logic is pretty much out the window with this movie. It's trying to combine 2 different genres that, on paper, I could see why he would want to go for it, but the execution itself just really didn't work. There are some pretty cool sequences, I will say, like thrilling scenes that I was on the edge of my seat, and I was very much so surprised that it's subverting expectations in other cases. But as a whole, the movie doesn't subvert expectations. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad per se, but it is a very safe movie. Like, if you've seen any 80s movie that's an action movie with Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger, you've probably seen this movie, and whether that's a good thing or bad thing definitely will depend and vary from person to person. So it's not necessarily a negative per se. It was just something that I personally wasn't able to 100% get on board with. But like I said, there were some pretty thrilling scenes. Angelina Jolie did a great job also. I really did like her, as well as the kid. He was really good. But I will say, some of the CGI isn't that good. The fire scenes in particular. And here's the thing. I don't blame them. In fact, it's not something where I'm like, oh, it's terrible. Like, I could do better. It's like, no, I know I could not do better. And secondly, I know that CGI fire is very difficult. I watch videos, shout out to Corridor Crew. But Corridor Crew, they even say it all the time. Like, fire is something that it's not easy to render. And it clearly shows because a lot of times movies and TV shows aren't really able to fully make it look realistic. This movie is definitely one of those examples, unfortunately. I don't know if it was because it was a lower budget or whatever the case may be, but if a movie takes place and it has a lot of fire and it doesn't look that good, that can be kind of an issue. So besides that, though, again, it's diverting. Like, I wasn't offended by this movie, and I didn't think it was terrible, but I also don't think it's a good movie. I definitely won't revisit this anytime soon. So, Those Who Wish Me Dead, it's diverting. I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5 star rating. So, yeah, no hot sauce rating. Next up, the third movie, and obviously the final movie that I'm talking about, is A Quiet Place. Part 2. So Quiet Place Part 2, if you haven't seen my review for the first A Quiet Place, I'll give you guys a little bit of recap of my thoughts on the first one. The first one I thought was good, but in retrospect, 3 years later, I don't know what my thoughts would be. I probably would just think it's okay. I like the premise. I like the sound mixing of that original movie. And I did like kind of how it ended, but at the same time, the execution of the ending did remind me a little bit too much of Stranger Things. Part 2, lesser did it feel like Stranger Things. More so did it feel like John Krasinski was even more passionate about this movie, because there were 2 sequences in particular that honestly are incredible. It's dealing with a lot of cross-cut editing in the style and the vein of, like, you know, Christopher Nolan. I thought those were really effective. They honestly built to a really interesting scene. I really dug that. Also, I love the usage of color. The usage of color and symbolism. You know, he has the color red utilized a lot, obviously to represent danger. And same with oranges. You know, oranges in mob films represent danger or how it's coming upon us. And I liked that. I like how John Krasinski used those motifs, because I use those motifs for, of course, Will Up and Drive. So I really like that Krasinski was doing that. Honestly, Krasinski has an eye. He really does have an eye for directing. I really thought that this movie was very well shot. The cinematography is really good. It's very much shows shot on film, you can tell, and I really liked that. Also, I wanted to say that all these positives aside, I do think the movie is just okay. And the reason why I say that is because I love the filmmaking. I think the filmmaking is great for this movie, and it did leave me entertained to some extent. But my issue with it is the fact that that ending clearly, unfortunately, I might add, also solidifies the fact that this movie just wasn't that necessary. And I say that because the ending is simply just setting up for a third one. Like, part 2 is simply like, hey, let's get from point A to B. And that can work sometimes, but I just personally wasn't 100% on board with the ending. You know, part of me says that, yes, I can see why some people might think it works, and maybe to some extent deep down I think it worked. But the surface level Chad says, no, that doesn't really work 100% because there are this issues. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything because it's a spoiler-free review, but I was left disappointed by that. And I did also think that despite being entertained throughout the duration, I do think that, you know, although characters mostly do stuff, there are some instances where characters do fall into cliches, unfortunately. And it's a shame, really. And some of the dialogue also feels a bit stilted, unfortunately. But besides that, I think that it's an entertaining movie for sure. And, you know, if you haven't seen it in theaters yet, I'd say give it a watch. So, Quiet Place Part 2, I will be giving a 3 out of 5 star rating, which, for those like a hot sauce rating, it's the good old Frank's hot sauce. Can't believe I almost forgot that. But yeah, Frank's hot sauce, just okay. So you guys, those are my thoughts on Profile. Those who wish me down on Quiet Place Part 2. What did you think about those movies? Or if you haven't seen all 3, just let me know your thoughts on whichever ones you have seen. And yeah, obviously I'll be getting you guys my review for Cruella, Conjuring 3, and of course Army of the Dead, which I still need to watch. So I will get those out to you guys soon. And as always, thank you very much for watching. You guys are the best. Don't forget subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.